Hello everyone, I am George from Ireland. So this video is about Donald Trump, who is an advocate for terrorism against his own people. I put it as boldly at that. The United States has come to a pretty pass when its own president will call for terrorist attacks on American citizens at home. I speak principally of the notorious Kyle Rittenhouse case, this 17-year-old who illegally transported an assault rifle from one state to another. He went out to look for Black Lives Matters protesters and he launched an unprovoked attack, shooting three of them. Two of them died. So two murders and one attempted murder. Of course, the man who so far survived may yet succumb to his injuries. It could yet be a triple murder. And then the police, having seen what he did, didn't arrest him for quite some time afterwards, made no attempt to intervene. So why was he there? To attack black people. He went quite some distance from his home to another state with his avowed purpose, from what little we can garner, and really there's no remotely plausible defense has been offered. So, and Trump is so often driven by this insensate lust for exaltation. I suppose he thinks that speaking up for this person will help him as well. Think of another murder, F. Aaron Danielson. So Trump says that this is peaceful protest, or firing paint pellets is peaceful protest, which it isn't. I mean, I know it's not fatal, or not usually. And Trump has got nary a word to say about murders committed by police officers against people. I'm not suggesting that most police officers are murderers or bad at all, far from it. So about 1,000 people were killed by the police in the United States last year, and I don't automatically assume that it's wrong when a police officer kills someone. It could be justified, but there would need to be an overwhelmingly good reason why they killed that person. We mustn't start from the presumption that the police are right every time they kill someone, or indeed that they're wrong. So Trump says that the demonstrators are anarchists, agitators, and troublemakers. Well, being an anarchist is a political position with which some might disagree radically, but that's not a crime in itself. It's not forbidden. Or being an agitator, demonstrator, really these are coterminous. They're synonymous. Look at them up in your dictionary. Are they troublemakers? Arguably. Depends what you mean. On a criminal level, well, that's debatable. Perhaps sometimes they are, but millions of people, and I mean tens of millions of people, have been on BLM protests in the United States and around the world, including yours truly, and the great majority of them are not criminals at all. Really are there saying things, carrying a banner. That's it. Being present, being counted. So there's no crime there at all. And Trump claims that he's a staunch defender of the United States Constitution, of the civil liberties of his people. Yet when these rights are invoked by those who disagree with him, he can't take it. He's absolutely irate that anyone have the temerity to advocate for a cause that he does not believe in. Something such as racial equality or opposing murder, he thinks that's unacceptable. So anyway, Trump is the troublemaker, of course. And First Amendment rights, freedom of expression, the right to protest, freedom of assembly. These are things he finds intolerable, and it's been recognised for centuries in the Anglosphere that people have the right to gather and agitate on public grievances. So all protesters are agitators. Trump references looting and burning, which is of course utterly reprehensible, and I don't know if any of the looters are involved in BLM at all. Maybe some of them are, probably a few of them are, but don't try and tar the whole movement with this, and always trying to change the subject from the gravamen of BLM's case, stop police murdering black people, to what people who are on the fringes of BLM at best have done, and doing nothing to deal with the cause, only looking at this symptom. They could be people who are not related to BLM at all. They could even be Trumpsters trying to do a false flag operation. There's no proof they're BLM people, not that I've seen. So anyway, Trump says that the BLM protesters know nothing about George Floyd. Is that why many of them have George Floyd t-shirts on, chant his name, carry banners with George Floyd's names on? Anyway, and remember who introduced this coarseness, this culture of violence into American politics? It was Donald Trump himself 4 years ago. Beat the shit out of them, were his exact words to his supporters at a rally. urging the crowd to severely beat up peaceful protesters there, saying they should be carried out on stretchers, inciting violence. The violence occurred. He persisted in inciting violence. How on earth is he not in prison for this already? It is staggering. It's just jaw-dropping what he's got away with. Done it in plain sight, done it repeatedly, and never even had his collar felt. One of the fairy tales that people tell us about the United States is there is equal justice when there absolutely is not. And he's a prime example of that, of how the wealthy, of how the well-connected can get away with murder, sometimes literally. Anyway, and remember the squad, those 4 Democratic Congresswomen, he told them they should go back home. These American citizens, some of them born American citizens, suggest they didn't have the right to be in the United States. What if someone told Trump to go to the United Kingdom because his mother was born there, or to Germany where his grandparents were born? He only does it to non-whites because he doesn't accept they're American. So he's appealing to a racist sentiment. I mean, it's more than a dog whistle. He's not even discreet about it. He was the one who disseminated this birther nonsense against Obama. He's spreading this birther madness, claiming that Kamala Harris doesn't have the right to be an American citizen. But he will not condemn. He will not speak out against the Ku Klux Klan when he was asked to last election, saying they're fine people on both sides in Charlottesville, as in what the white supremacists, one of whom murdered a defenseless woman. So unsurprising, there's been an upswing in white supremacist activity under the Trump administration. It's got his imprimatur, and the FBI has recorded an increase in neo-Nazi terrorism. They have been given a certificate of respectability by the president. So racist memes have been seen in Republican advertisements this election cycle. Black men released on bail, that their mugshots shown in Republican videos, as in this is obviously Willie Horton territory. It's redolent of the dark days of 1988 when Michael Dukakis was the Democrats' candidate, and he was governor of Massachusetts, and under some sort of parole scheme, he'd allowed prisoners out of prison a little bit early, and one of them, Willie Horton, had then gone to murder someone. But the Republican message was, Mr. Horton happened to be black. Oh, if you elect the Democratic standard bearer, this will happen all the time, appealing to white anxiety, and Project Fear worked, may well pay dividends again, I'm afraid. Just like Putin may be thinking that last time, for a few $1 million, he achieved a remarkable success in getting his agent, Donald Trump, elected, in sowing such discord in the United States, there being virtually no pushback. It's worth it. He'll do it again. Why wouldn't he? His efforts were crowned with success. So Trump is scaremongering, false accusing Biden of socialism when he's absolutely a capitalist, of raising taxes on the average person, which is not true at all. He only wants to raise it on millionaires, that Obama's going to wreck the economy. In fact, this is what Trump has done. He's obviously wrecked the economy. More of the tax burden is going to go on the middle class, the working class, as Trump has cut taxes for the super wealthy, and on and on. I mean, Trump believes in corporate welfare, socialism for the very wealthy, people on minimum wage having to subsidize the super rich. So Trump goes on about there are people in the dark shadows pulling the strings of Biden campaign. So there are no particulars here, no corroboratory evidence. It's completely unworthy of belief. Trump saying people on a plane were flying from somewhere to somewhere, not remotely credible. There were thugs in black uniforms. What does it matter if they're wearing uniforms? And how do we know they were thugs? Thugs in what sense? I mean, obviously Trump is a thug, not physically, because he doesn't have the courage and probably never had the physical strength or coordination. So all these supposed thugs flying somewhere who've actually done nothing, he can't point to anything, that's got no link to Biden whatsoever. So Trump says some people flew from somewhere to somewhere. Wow, that's it. What a plot he's uncovered. He must be a super sleuth to know that some people got on a plane. And he will tell you sometime. So these things are unfalsifiable because his claims are completely vague and lacking in specificity. Anyway, so Trump says more terrible things about the Democrats. They want low-income housing, and with that comes crime. So people on an average income are criminals. There he is insulting the majority of Americans. So Trump doesn't want affordable housing. Let's call it that. He wants people to have unaffordable housing, to live overcrowded, to have to pay too much in rent or whatever, and then not have a disposable income. And by the way, affordable housing would actually boost the economy in terms of building it, people having more of a disposable income, and so forth. So Trump wants class segregation, which is obviously intersectional with racial segregation so often. That was in the Laura Ingraham interview that Fox News telebimbo, race baiter, who's adopted some immigrant children but thinks that immigrants are evil. So cognitive dissonance, if ever there was such a case. So then Trump likened shooting dead a black man, shooting him in the back, to a golf putt. Can you believe that? I mean, how sickening is that? Golf, that's fun. So he thinks like killing a black man is a leisure activity, and it's so inconsequential if you get it wrong. I mean, if you're not a professional golfer, there's nothing riding on it. Even if you are playing the PGA and $1 million is going on it, that's nothing compared to somebody's life. Anyway, he paints a completely false picture of Biden. The economy improved when Biden was vice president, improved hugely. Illegal immigration was down, crime was down, there was healing, there was unity, there were moves towards peace abroad, peace with Iran was secured. So you look by contrast at Trump's manifold precipitancies. His vile outbursts to win the approbation and applause of his mob. He's a scorner of knowledge, complete ignoramus, disgrace. He's bereft of common decency, common courtesy. He's a ghoul. He's the troll in chief. So he poses uncompromising, but so often in the form of volte-face over the government shutdown, over child separations and so on at the border. I have to paint his presidency in the darkest of hues just to do it justice. He's not been tamed by affection. You think his wife might mollify him or something, an immigrant. But Trump always craves adulation. He's very susceptible to flattery, which is why he could easily be exploited by Putin. Just ran rings around him. So Trump's foulness has overleapt that of every previous US president, even his worst predecessors, and some of them were very decent men, by the way. He's scathing towards those he doesn't perceive as indigenous, despite, of course, he's not a Native American, so he's not indigenous there. And yet he reserved disdainful words for Elizabeth Warren, who's partly Native American. And Trump, he thought that Kamala Harris's reasonable questions to Brett Kavanaugh, when Kavanaugh was trying to get on the Supreme Court, he thought this was impertinence on her part. What, because an ethnic minority woman doesn't have the right to ask some very relevant questions to someone who's asking for the highest honor in American jurisprudence? Well, it's staggering. But by contrast, that was a very nasty question, he said. By contrast, Trump will come out with the foulest and most misogynistic insults against women who ask him germane questions in an interview, like Megyn Kelly 4 years ago when he was seeking the Republican nomination. He can't take it, throws the toys out of the pram when he's put on the spot. And so got this particular fear of women, it seems to me, reasonably self-assured women, intelligent women, frighten the life out of him. That is very telling. So he is fighting the election with his characteristic mendacity and his trademark unscrupulousness. You see, he is an incipient tyrant, and only the Constitution has boxed him in. I hope it holds. But he's not even furtive about asking people to cheat, urging his supporters to vote twice yesterday. So he has no care for welfare, having persuaded Congress to defund the Affordable Care Act and reduce Medicare, reduce Medicaid. So it's sort of farewell to welfare for him. You think of the suffering he's caused the most vulnerable people in society. He's not daring at all. These are easy wins that they play well with Republican donors. And what does he do for amusement and occupation? I mean, golf, he cheats liberally, but is really braggadocio. That's his main pastime, always has been. He's managed to turn that into a way of making money, selling his name. So his wit, it's not even childish. It doesn't even rise that high. He has a natural aversion to knowledge, a detestation of the clever. Maybe that's why he's increasingly turned against Dr. Fauci, saying, I inherited this guy. Well, if he's so bad, you could sack him. You fired so many other people. Anyway, Trump obviously doesn't show due care and attention to his duties, do any homework. That's why he speaks in cliches, and he comes out with trite notions all the time, and has only a very stereotypical understanding of other countries. You'd think you need to study the minutiae on something like coronavirus. Obviously, he's not an epidemiologist, a virologist, can't know that much. But some sort of modelling what's going to happen if we do this, or if we pursue another policy in terms of social distancing, or how long should the shutdown be? No, not looking into it at all, not asking for briefings. So diligence is needed on these technical matters, and they're sometimes unglamorous. So Trump has high ambition only for himself. You want someone who's not personally motivated, actuated by self-aggrandizement. You want someone who's unambitious personally, only has ambitions for the country. So that's one of the reasons why he's so blatantly unsuitable for high office. He demands blind loyalty from others. That's where he really likes the military, instant obedience. He despises discipline in a sense. He's so ill-disciplined himself. Nothing retains his attention for long. And that's what discipline requires. So he wants instant gratification, something that Republicans are supposed to oppose. Trump has no maintenance of aim because you need to focus on your goal, pursue it relentlessly. However difficult and arduous that path is, stay on it. Now, Trump's not like that. Attention span of a mayfly. So what motivates him is vanity and egomania. That's what makes him tick. The presidency offered boundless vistas for him. He could see limitless praise and endless attention, and that gives him the acutest pleasure. Frippery, gewgaws, however tawdry and base they are, they hold an unparalleled appeal for him. And if he has to advocate for terrorism to get all these things, yeah, he'll do it. Adulation for him is far more important to him than black people being murdered. That was completely unimportant in his view. So you don't need to know much of sexual psychology to understand that he desires Ivanka, which he has said. So he's reminiscent of a roi fainéant of Henry VIII as some sort of medieval obese tyrant, an ogre, and he's so irascible as well, as he's in increasingly infirm health. I really hope that 2 months today there'll be a short, sharp shock for the Grand Old Party. It's gradually being eroded by white decline, possibly corroded by toxic Trumpism. But Trump, even if he loses, shan't withdraw from gays. When he was in public gaze, there were many strokes the other day. He may well have had a more serious one last year when he's rushed to a hospital, and they wouldn't give us any explanation on that one. So the polls are portentous, and even Trump has acknowledged it's ominous for him, but he could still retain his clutch at the White House. Anyway, just thinking what his cardinal vice is, malice, I suppose. He's got many other mental disabilities. His impatience, his lack of application, which I already alluded to. He's so easily goaded into fury by even decent questions. He has to be coaxed to even feign politeness. And you notice the swiftness with which he abandons people when they no longer serve his purpose, when they embarrass him. So he's so anxious to dispute the indisputable, to tell barefaced lies all the time. And then the American public is so bamboozled by this, some people can't tell truth from lies because of him. He should be friendless the way he treats people, and he knows a mark when he sees one. But obviously there are plenty of sycophants, there are plenty of people who worship wealth and power or seek preferment by kowtowing to him. But I don't think he's done obeisance to others, but he demands that people abase themselves before him, and then there are plenty of bootlickers out there. So if Biden wins, I will feel probably relief more than ecstasy. Obviously, Biden's got his debilities as well, perhaps not so many severe shortcomings as Hillary Clinton had. I'll be hoping for a blossoming of race relations in the United States, but I think that's probably too much to expect. It goes back to this ill-founded notion that a black president would necessarily end racial divisions in the United States. But I know for many people, including myself, talk of systemic racism is importunate. I realise there's obviously a measure of truth in that, but if Biden talks about it too much, it might redound to his disadvantage. But undoubtedly, there's an estrangement between the police and elements of the African American community, and it's not hard to see why. Just today, a man killed by the police who put a plastic bag over his head to stop him spitting. Even if he did spit, you should kill him like that, suffocate him. What a horrific way to go. All in plain view, on camera. Imagine what they were doing when they weren't being filmed. And as I've emphasised before, I don't blame most police officers for this, even for covering it up. Most of them not involved. So the veneration of Trump persists, despite the numerous calamities he's inflicted upon his people. And it may need some elapse of time before proper republicanism is restored, rather than this demented cult of Trumpism. there is a real attachment between white supremacy and the Grand Old Party at the moment, and I'm not suggesting every Republican is a white supremacist. Perhaps there's some who are as nauseated by it as I am. I can't see how you could vote for Trump then. You could vote for maybe some senatorial candidates, gubernatorial candidates, people in the House of Representatives, but not Trump. So anyway, this is speculative about how the Republican Party could change. But Trump certainly is indifferent to the cruel pangs suffered by Black Americans these days. Trump is a nightmare which will haunt us for some time to come, even after he's out of office. He has inflicted many wounds on American society, which may take decades to heal. So the damage he's wrought in public trust in institutions, damage he's wrought on that, is perhaps the worst thing he's done. His flagrant partiality, the way he's undermined public confidence in the FBI, the National Security Agency, Homeland Security, the CIA, and so forth. That's worrying, and that's not going to go away even when he does. So he's really poisoned things. He hasn't drained the swamp. He is a swamp animal. He has deepened the swamp and the mire and brought in people, Wall Street people, when he said he would get rid of them, into his cabinet. So the GOP is at the moment consecrated to Trump. Okay, it's just dedicated to his adulation. People pledging allegiance to him, and he wants them to be loyal to him personally, not the United States, not the Constitution. So many of his followers openly yearn for an all-white United States, which never actually existed, but one where African Americans were denizens, not citizens. So these people should ask themselves, would Trump pass a citizenship test? I sincerely doubt it. So people speak plaintively of the end of white America. Some of the white supremacists did. But surely the end of white majority America would usher in more of an era of racial harmony, as whites would be a minority or a plurality. So even white supremacists won't have to rein in their behavior. And I've goaded white supremacists about this. I regularly cross swords with them on the internet. So what are you going to do? Are you going to leave? Being an immigrant is evil, isn't it? So I vainly hope there'll be placidity, someone who will rise to the majesty of the office and be embosomed by loyal people serving him well. That might be Joe Biden. What is Trump going to bequeath to posterity? Well, like Rudolph Giuliani said, truth is not truth. Wow. I know that wasn't actually Trump, but that says a lot about this maladministration, this wretched regime in the Oval Office. Or Trump's Fifth Avenue doctrine, he could shoot someone dead on broad daylight in Fifth Avenue and get clean away with it. And he's more or less done it. Not actual murder, but almost every other crime in the statute book. So his temperament and tastes probably summed up by another thing which could be on his tombstone, grab him by the pussy. And that's pretty much been his attitude to everything he's done in his life, from fraud to urging people to cheat in elections. So he's sardonic, he's caustic, but he's not shrewd, although I know his low cunning should not be underestimated or misunderestimated, as George W. Bush would say. Trump's never affectionate, never tender towards his children, towards his wives. He's never humorous either. He's sometimes vile, capable of a low blow, always punching down, never punching up. So when people narrate the course of his life, it'll match almost perfectly with a chronicle of American decline. I vainly hope that America might gain strength, or might become better in all sorts of ways once he's gone. I don't think it probable. So he is an incomparably vivid example of all the nation's vices. They're all incarnate in one man. It's like the worst made flesh, or made fleshly too, and there's a lot of it. He's got the body of a trained athlete, a sumo wrestler, and this is me speaking, someone who's tubby myself. So Trumpism and racism are largely the same, inseparable. They're intimately connected. So his vulgarity is something which really marks him out amongst Republican politicians. They're usually not foul-mouthed. And I'm not against bad language. There's a time and a place for swearing. So he has shown not the slightest interest in the betterment of his people. A few of his billionaire cronies, yes, but not 99.999% of Americans. And these screeds which tumble from his gluttonous maw have caused real harm, have inflamed racial tensions, and he doesn't care, nor do a lot of his supporters. So he's graceless, he's singularly scapegrace, this fake tan Führer, The air is palpitant with lies around him. That's just part of his breathing rhythm. He's got that peculiar fixation with the PP tape, which is strong evidence that it is a veracious claim. A guilty conscience about that one, about having ladies of the night urinate on him in Moscow. That's what troubles him most of all the rumours about him. So I think they hit the bullseye when they came up with that story. So he's a man of preternatural amorality. Sometimes I think he's atavistic. He's like a throwback to Cro-Magnon man, motivated by about 3 urges. He's completely uncivilized. Went to Wharton and Fordham, these good colleges. But it reminds me of what one of the Sitwells said. In England, education produces no effect whatsoever. Well, it seems to be true in the United States as well. You can see the self-centeredness on his countenance. You can read the thought processes there, mulling it over. How am I going to get out of this one? How am I going to make it look good for me? So he doesn't care about the excruciating pain he inflicted on people by persuading Congress to repeal the Affordable Care and Patient Protection Act. People have died from this, really died. That's not a metaphor, have died in agony because of that. Thousands of them, at least. And the Republican Party doesn't care and has actually done nothing to make it more affordable, has done nothing to try and relieve people's suffering. So when Trump's gone, and I hope it's in 2 months, in January rather, there'll be gladness mingled with sorrow for all the harm he's done and for the fact that this is not going to disappear for quite some time. Draining the poison of Trumpism is going to take years, decades, I would think. I know some of these bad tendencies in American life were there for a long time, but he hugely aggravated them. Anyway, discordant voices shall carry on saying that Trump was the greatest president ever, that he was robbed of his right to serve even a 3rd term, which he's claimed, and he shall rage on. He will not go gently into that good night. So perhaps Biden will come in and modulate policies more sensibly. I think he's probably not going to reverse the Jerusalem embassy decision. Tone has to change. Trump's vulgar tone, it dominated the airwaves for a few years. The media danced to its tune. I'm not saying he got favourable reportage all the time, but there was a lot. He was very newsworthy. There was a lot to report. But this might actually damage Trump because Trump fatigue has set in. There's this surfeit of Trump in the news. People are just saturated with him, just don't want to hear anymore. It just no longer has such effect as like taking a drug again and again. You build up a tolerance to it. You just stop listening to Trumpism. But his harsh, yapping timbre shall not be missed, certainly by me. He expresses the bottommost thoughts in mankind. So his inhumanity to others is very notable. This is the behaviour that befits a psychopath, a complete indifference to the suffering of others. He's very highly strung, petulant, extremely thin-skinned. And anyway, thank God he doesn't like guns. Imagine what he'd do if he was one of those people who's walking around with a gun. So the Republican Party was simply a convenient juggernaut for him, and he can cast it aside as long as it no longer serves his purpose. If he loses, he could just go back to business and say, oh, I wanted to anyway. A way of coping with defeat. So Fluke somehow bestowed so much on someone who was so utterly unworthy of the presidency. That's the vagaries of the Electoral College. He thinks he's a genius. Well, he doesn't exactly hold symposia. He has no recondite knowledge, this so-called author. Anyway, like his administration was an example of perfect confusion and chaos. There are all sorts of unfinished policies, things that are unthought through, completely unworkable, like that border wall, only about 25 miles of which has been built. I know a lot more of fence was replaced, but of actual new wall is about 25 miles. So racist policies lurked beneath almost every public pronouncement. And if you're going to make sensible policy, you don't just make it on the hoof, you have some dialectical discussion, well, almost like a Socratic method. What is our aim here? What is the best way to achieve that? What are the practicalities? We can't do that for legal reasons. We can't do that for fiscal reasons. You've got to bear in mind the economic constraints. Think what the time frame is going to be. Weigh up the pros and cons of the different options and consider the likelihood of success, or what actually success means. Unlikely to have 100% success. But Trump's not like that. He was captious towards anyone who offered him unwelcome advice. They were a naysayer, a malcontent. He cavilled when others told him some of the pitfalls of their plans. They were simply being responsible. So they just had to humour him. So he's unrelaxing only about speaking his name. Otherwise, he was notorious for his torpor and playing golf so much. About the most energetic thing he did. Can't walk more than 100 yards as to go in a golf cart. He's completely self-absorbed. He's assiduous only about self-publicity. He's malignant. He's completely irreverent, completely disrespectful towards those who so richly merit his respect. He has no esteem for anyone. I suppose he pretends to think the army's a great thing, really, because he thinks he can just get kudos from hanging out with soldiers. It seemed like he's macho or something. So he's not capable of contemplation or cognition or ratiocination. He's not awestruck by his office, which a thinking person would be. He's managed to dazzle many simpletons with his glitter, because, as I say, there are many mammon worshippers. There's this sort of Puritan streak in American thought that money is virtuous. So if you're rich, you're good, you deserve it, and poverty is vice. So if you are penurious, then you deserve it. You're wicked. So the clumsy tumult which has characterized his office continues, but the wheels may be coming off. You think of the damage he's done to the fabric of society, and not used his office to speak out against by gross brutality by police. The incommensurable deceitfulness of his discourse has damaged American life as well, because other lying politicians can come along and follow in the trail that he's blazed and get away with it to a large extent. So prejudgment on race is one of the main problems to be tackled now. It might never be completely tackled, but he's not even taken one step towards reducing it. So the United States is at a low ebb, a country which is really not happy with itself. He has managed to deepen and entrench divisions, and there's a gulf between Republicans and Democrats on so many things. He has a complete distaste for decency. Think of Clinton, for all his faults, trying to be a uniter, not a divider. So Trump didn't follow the prescribed course set for people in his office to show respect for institutions, partly because he needs them and that they need him, and it's good for the country. I realise blind respect can be excessive. You sometimes need to challenge institutions to shake them up, but it's not like that. It's not logical. There's no good reason for him to be so hostile towards all these security agencies. It's simply because they told the truth about Russian interference in the election. So his fitful tweeting for his rabble, that's what passed for work for him. These verminious hordes who hold him in the highest possible regard. So anyway, he is a man who's rather lacking in mental faculties. He's clearly got senile dementia. You can see him drowsy in public. And yet he projects against Joe, called Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe. Trump is really angry when that's the only time he's high energy. Now I know Trump is a terrible debater. Joe Biden isn't exactly a dexterous reasoner either, but he's much better than Trump. And it's worrying that Trump could consign us all to nuclear oblivion, a man of this impulsivity. He's got this complete lack of self-control, emotional incontinence. That's why verbal diarrhea comes out so often. Remember how he was so vehement against North Korea, Little Rocket Man, and then he fell in love with Kim Jong-un, one of the cruelest tyrants in the world? You can judge a man by the company he chooses. It just speaks volumes about him, that he would want to kiss and make up with such a pernicious regime. But and then Trump's so antagonistic towards free countries, towards NATO allies, and that's how he's enfeebled America, by weakening the Atlantic Alliance. So Trump, who hails Putin, and yet shows merciless severity towards his own people. So Trump is so obnoxious, and he's a culprit in so many ways. He's weakened the United States. All-embracing vanity is what has driven him. It's a love of himself, self-aggrandizement. That is his one pursuit. Avarice was partly to measure his supposed greatness in money. He's impassioned about money, as he said that. So I don't think he'll sally forth against Iran. That's another worry I have in the next 2 months. Playing his last card, he might try that one. He was facetious about Obama's peacemaking, and it was painstaking, and it almost didn't happen, but it was a magnificent achievement, the Iran deal. So Trump might view losing as martyrdom. His pecuniary position might be precarious, all sorts of lawsuits against him. Anyway, I long for the day when he's just an anamnesis. He is but a worldling, so he might die quite soon. Toodaloo.